Hi, this is Sarah Tegender, Director of Sales, coming to you with the Marketing Overview and Getting Started Guide. I'm going to show you how to best utilize this 6-page document in understanding and sharing gene SNP DNA analysis. What the first page of this guide is going to be is the same as the customizable or editable report that you, the practitioner, will use with the patient. And so right here, it has the patient's name and test ID. And we just do this not for you to use this to give to the patient, but more for you to have an example of what that looks like. So right here, this is the same as the editable report. And if you are one of our nutraMetrix consultants, this is how you have access to how to read and use this editable guide, since the editable guide is not something that you have access to as just a consultant. We want to just put that disclaimer there that this is not medical care or intervention. Gene SNP DNA analysis is not diagnostic in nature either. This is just to help you understand the genes that we use with gene SNP DNA analysis and the nutrient interactions above the scope of obesity that we at nutraMetrix feel like you need for optimal health for the patient. And practitioners have lots of resources if they have specific questions about how to get more out of the genes and genetic potential, whether it is our closed forum of our official nutraMetrix Health Professional Support Facebook page, or by emailing yourgenesnp@nutrametrix.com. Either way is completely appropriate. We feel like when we put together this tool that it's even more robust and goes even deeper into the conversation of nutrigenomics than the lab report. So when the practitioner goes ahead and does the swab, they will receive back in about 8 to 12 weeks 2 copies of a lab report from our partner vendor. We believe that our editable guide is even more comprehensive, where the lab that we use has more of a focus on obesity when it comes to the genes. That everything that you could find in that report is nothing more than you could get from a preliminary Google search. It doesn't really go into other aspects of optimal health, which we have done in this iteration of the editable guide. So we do think that you should use this guide. And most of our top providers using gene SNP DNA analysis do not give those lab reports to the patient. They just use that lab report to really create their report of findings and find out the various genotype for the patient. And so what this report is going to do is it's going to give you a really great perspective on which area of health you're going to prioritize in your lifestyle counseling with your patient. And each gene is the unique result of the patient. We'll also give a description of the polymorphism, so that is, which variation of that gene the patient has, the mechanism of action, its area of health, and the recommendations for lifestyle and nutrient intervention. And so when you're reading the report, it's in this stoplight format. So red, meaning it has a negative effect on the patient. Yellow means it has neutral, it's not negative or positive. And green means it has some sort of protective or beneficial effect for that patient, but also those areas of health. So you do want to look and see, in the different reds that might come up, is there more reds in the scope of cardiovascular health, in methylation, in nutrient utilization? Is there one particular area of health that you should prioritize for that patient? And then in working with the patient, understanding their health history, their current history, some family history, to find out if that's of concern and is or isn't presenting itself. And so yellow is a neutral allele. It's a neutral polymorphism, but they could turn into risk alleles as well if there's environmental factors that will negatively influence the behavior of the SNP. what they're really finding with nutrigenomics is it truly is that micronutrient environment that either turns on or turns off different genes. Okay, so you can see here, here's an example, the FTO812 gene, and we've put here little nicknames for the genes. So this one is the androgen gene. There's different notes here with those genes. You'll see the different variations that you might find, the different polymorphisms, an overview of that as well. Now, genes do have varied strength, and so it's important to understand the polymorphism based on its relationship to other genes. And we will highlight or let you know if there are different genes that are linked together. And so, there is something here, like this particular gene, we give you an example. If you have this genotype that's associated with stressful eating, and you do carry extra weight. So see, gene SNP can't be done in a vacuum. You can't do it just looking at it, and you could not be able to draw a picture of a patient or pick that patient out of a lineup. You don't know if these genes are turned on or turned off. If this particular patient had this gene, the next question would be, does the patient have an increased BMI? Does the patient have an increased body fat? Are they carrying around some extra weight? Because if so, you might want to look at the LEP, the LEPR, the MC4R, and the FTO gene to find out relative risk for metabolic concerns. Childhood obesity is a significant concern. Now, if you're working with a geriatric patient, we're not going to counsel that patient on childhood obesity. Also, procreation for that particular patient, that window may have already passed. But, if you're counseling a young woman who is in preconception and doing some family planning, in figuring out how she can suppress a gene that will then, have the potential to influence childhood obesity in our offspring, that's a whole different conversation. So again, gene SNP DNA analysis can't work in a vacuum. It has to work with a patient so you understand the appropriate lifestyle counseling. So here are the areas of impact and the symbols. So nutrient metabolism, and it's sort of like that mortar and pestle symbol. Inflammation with the fiery symbol. Cardiovascular health with the heart. Hormonal health with the blood drop, obesity with the scale, mental emotional health with the silhouette of the head, fitness with the barbell, and children's health with the little silhouette of the child. And so these are the ways that we've broken down. So again, when you're looking through the report and you're looking through to kind of scan quickly, how many reds of the homozygous? So homozygous is going to be where you have two of the same letters next to each other. So the gene may be the AA gene or the TT gene or the GG gene. If it is both homozygous and red, that's going to be of concern to you. And so if you have a predominantly red homozygous next to a lot of the genes that also have a mental emotional health symbol next to them, that is going to be the first priority when you're working with patients in lifestyle counseling. So really, when it comes to your health, we're finding that the secrets and the answers are in your genes. And finally, we do have a tool that gives you those answers. Remember that the human genome was just recently unraveled, really in the last decade. This is all real new technology that we're just beginning to understand. So you can gain insight into your genetics, how they impact your health, the role that they play in digestion, coping with stress, other environmental factors. And one of my favorite things is just, mitigating that and the impact it can potentially have on future generations. It's just so exciting. They're finding that parents who suppress those, not favorable genes are less likely to pass them on in future offsprings. That to me just sounds so promising for the next generation. And so no two people are the same, and our genetic variation is unique for us. And this goes beyond just our gender and the color of our hair, eyes, and skin, right? It doesn't matter, how many blueberries I eat. My eyes aren't going to get bluer. My daughter who has brown eyes, her eyes eyes will not turn blue. It doesn't work like that. But nutrigenomics is looking at the genes that can be influenced by diet, can be influenced by micronutrient status, can be influenced by things like sleep and stress. It is really exciting science that we have here. And so the genes are just combinations of protein bases. There's only 4 possible bases, if you remember basic 4th grade science. And they can be combined in billions of ways for countless functions of the body. All humans are about 99% genetically the same. And it's that 1% that makes us all different. And this is going to give the instruction manual for your body on how to do everything from how your cells function to the color of your hair. And sometimes when new DNA is replicated, mistakes are made, and this could just be off by 1 base. And now this is called a single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNP. And so when we can understand our own unique gene variation, that's where we can truly customize lifestyle approaches, nutritional supplementation, and maximizing our genetic potential. Research is showing that people who follow a genetic-based diet and lifestyle protocol are 2 times more likely to stick to that plan. So it is huge when it comes to, truly making a lifestyle change. And diseases they're finding are influenced by our genes. And there's about 4,000 diseases that are from mutated genes from either one's mother or one's father or even both. And so when a gene has a mutation, the protein that's encoded is going to be abnormal. And some don't really matter, but others make a huge difference. And so these are common disorders like heart disease, obesity, depression, and there's a whole interplay between genes and then environment. You hear people say, heart disease, that just runs in my family. You could be right. It could be, that the genes are running in your family. It could also be, though, that a sedentary lifestyle runs in your family. It could be those family recipes that are running in your family. There are ways that you can take really a bad set of genes or a bad play of hands and change the micronutrient status, change those lifestyle factors, and suppress, the genes that you're seeing play out generation to generation. You can absolutely be the change. And so it's a powerful tool for all these reasons. We look at cardiovascular health. And so you can read through this guide, how we're looking at cardiovascular health, how we're looking at obesity, how we're looking at fitness, inflammation, mental, emotional health, and detoxification. And so you as a practitioner, you may be a specialist, you may be a licensed mental health counselor, and you're going to prioritize potentially the mental emotional health genes. You're still getting such a great tool with GeneSNP DNA analysis, even if you're just looking at that panel of genes. You may be a cardiologist, that's what you're called, a cardiologist, and you're prioritizing the cardiovascular health genes. You may be in primary care, but your main focus that you're going to use GeneSNP DNA analysis for is patients who are having a really hard time with just the, old age adage of, eat less and move more. You want to be able to serve patients in a way that goes beyond just the regular scope of obesity, but you really want to put this into a more comprehensive weight management program. Then you're going to prioritize the obesity genes. So it's perfectly appropriate for you to use GeneSNP DNA analysis in its totality, but we're finding that most practitioners are really honing in and focusing on those panels that make sense for their scope of practice, that make sense for the patient base that's coming to them asking for GeneSNP DNA analysis. Some terms that you should know, whether you're a practitioner or a consultant. DNA, that's where we should start. And that's a nucleic acid that carries genetic information contained in each cell. You should know what genotype is, the genetic makeup of an organism. But you should also know what phenotype is, and that's the expression of a certain trait based on genetic and environmental influences. Just because you have a certain genotype doesn't mean you have that phenotype. It does not mean that the gene is expressing itself. SNP, we went over that, the single nucleotide polymorphism. It's a commonly found change in a single nucleotide base in a DNA sequence. And this is what's new and exciting, is that each practitioner report, each editable practitioner report has what we have here as the nickname or the common name. So the FAIM2, the FAIM2 gene, we're calling the endothelial gene. And that just helps it stick in your head a little bit more. Because as you become more familiar with gene SNP DNA analysis, as you use this tool more and you figure out which genes you really want to focus in on for your scope of practice, for how you're using gene SNP DNA analysis, you'll now go right to say, well, you know what, I want to go to the endothelial gene first. That's what I want to look at when I see this patient type walk in. You'll also see those icons or badges. They're set up in order of importance. So for the FAIM2 gene or the endothelial gene, you can see the little scale icon. Remember, that meant obesity. So this gene is mostly related to obesity. The next area would be cardiovascular health, then nutrient metabolism, and then mental emotional health. So it's that whole icon that is all set up in order of importance. Each variation has quick reference. So these are some notes of what it means. Increased tendency to store fat, increased LDL, endothelial dysfunction. Just if you want the quick, cliff note bullet points right there. And then they'll have each page is going to have its own variation overview. So if you were there with a patient and they had the AA gene, you can see it is green. So that means, remember in our stoplight, that it is going to have a protective effect there. And so, it's a gain SNP, it says. It keeps a healthy oxidative environment within the cell. It's going to see the variation overview, the patient outcome, what you're going to see, and those lifestyle recommendations. There's going to be some other tips. This is a specific lifestyle recommendation with some important information. And so there's some graphics or pictures or charts that can, help create a visual for you in impacting your patient's results. So each gene itself, so the FAIM2 gene, are going to have 3 different pages with 3 different variations, and you will choose and print out the page that is appropriate, that matches, right, the genotype for your patient and matches what you want to counsel your patient on in lifestyle counseling, whether it is the totality of, the entire report and all 48 SNPs that we do test for, or if you're just choosing the specific panel that's most appropriate for you or your patient. Let's just go to when you order gene SNP DNA analysis and the collection kit from nutraMetrix. Just want to give you some kit basics. You're going to receive 2 swabs in sanitary packaging, and you're going to have 2 halves of the swab holder. And so what you're going to do the cheek swab is rinse out the mouth 3 times with water. This does not need to be a fasting test, but we can't have any other protein mixed with the patient's protein. And, compliance can be sometimes tough for patients. So telling the patients to come in first thing in the morning, they go ahead and they have coffee with cream on their way into your office. Obviously that, milk proteins that are in the mouth from the coffee with cream may affect the test. So some practitioners like just saying to make it a fasting test, to come in first thing, or to explain to them that they can't have anything but water prior to doing the cheek swab. You're going to collect the tissue by swabbing and rolling both cheeks, 30 seconds per cheek. It's up to you as the practitioner if you want to go ahead and swab the patient or you want them to swab themselves right there. The swabs do have to dry for 15 minutes, and then you're going to put it together, put the caps on, and put the halves together. Okay, there's a foam piece, and you'll insert into the tube with a signed consent form. And you cap it and you ship it however you would like to ship it, as long as it goes to the lab within 7 days of sampling. So we do not include shipping, whether you want to do your own UPS or FedEx pickup, you want to send it via, 2-day priority, via United States Postal Service, whatever it is, as long as you know it's going to get to the lab within 7 days of the sampling. You also want to make sure, and I did forget this, to attach the patient ID stickers, one on each half of the swab tool holder, a third on the permanent office file. You could give one to the patient for their records. We do give you 4. You want to make sure you do that because that is the only identifying piece of information that's on the swab that for you, the practitioner, is going to match it to the patient. That's how we keep confidentiality with our GeneSNP DNA analysis program. And you can then mail multiple swabs together at the same time, as long as they do, get to the lab within 7 days of sampling. That's fine to bundle ship them as well. You're going to want to call the lab, that's all on the form, ahead of time prior to sending in the samples. We hope that this 6-page document is really helpful for both you, the practitioner, and the consultant in what tools we have available when working with GeneSNP DNA analysis.